Hello, everyone. I am Dr. Rahul Gupta, the Chief Medical and Health Officer at Marsha Dimes. Thank you for joining us this afternoon for today's Healthy Moms and Strong Babies webinar. The health of pregnant people, new parents, babies, and their families. Today, we'll be focusing on the dads. We will have conversations about having a baby and being a dad in these unprecedented times. And our guests will impart some really important fatherly advice as we are celebrating fatherhood. Before we get started, I'd be remiss not to mention that this may not be a happy day for all fathers. Some have faced a loss and may only have been a dad for a very short while. And for others who lose a partner, they still may be facing single parenthood. Here at Marsha Dimes, for those facing a loss, we see you and we are here for you. We're also working to improve the infant and maternal mortality rates across the United States. And we want every birth to be a joyful one. We want every birth to count. For most, the birth of a child is a joyful time, but it's still stressful. With the ongoing pandemic, it is a daunting time to become a father. Some may be wondering, what about the dads? What do the dads need to know about COVID-19 and supporting a partner during labor and delivery, as well as the postpartum period? What is the actual role, or what are the roles for dads? Others may be just looking for resources about fatherhood and real advice from those who are fathers themselves. Well, we've got some great news today. We will talk about all of this. We have an amazing panel of fathers and healthcare providers who are here to share their experiences and expertise to help us convey the crucial roles that father figures play in the lives of their pregnant partners and their children. You know, prenatal and through the birthing process, it's really important to understand the process. Therefore, I want to thank our panelists for being here today. I would also like to thank Cigna for their support of this webinar. Now today, throughout the conversation, we really encourage you to type in your questions into the chat box, and our guests will respond to these questions during our audience Q&A section of this webinar very soon. So let me go ahead and introduce you to our panel today. Ted Gang is the father of triplets who were born at 24 weeks. They were 13 weeks premature. Ted decided to share his family's story in his book, Table for Five, A Father's Story of Life, Love and Loss. That was released in November of last year on Prematurity Awareness Day. He's an advocate for prematurity awareness and for families facing premature birth and loss. We're glad to have him. Clarence Robinson is the Southwestern Regional Vice President of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity. 10 years ago, his daughter was born at 1 pound, 4 ounces. Terrence and his wife have served as Marsha Dimes ambassadors, acting as both fundraisers and counselors to other parents experiencing difficulties during pregnancy and around birth. Rob Hubel is an award-winning actor, writer, comedian, known for his many television and movie roles. You may have seen him recently in Transparent, Medical Police, or HBO's I Know This Much Is True. Rob is a mission dad whose daughter was born 3 months early. And he's a great friend of the Marsha Dimes. You can start to see a theme develop here. From Ted to Terrence to Rob, we have great Marsha Dimes supporters and friends here today. Dr. Neil Shah is an assistant professor of obstetrics, gynecology, and reproductive biology at Harvard Medical School, where his work focuses on designing solutions that enable birthing people to thrive. He also serves on the National Advisory Board of the Office of Women's Health Research at the National Institutes of Health. In 2017, Dr. Shah co-founded the March for Moms Association, a coalition of more than 20 leading organizations to increase public and private investment in the well-being of mothers. He's also a father of 2 toddlers and a friend of March Times. Jesse Ray Spivey was inspired by his mother's birth work with Her Health First and Black Mothers United to become a full-time doula. He attends births in San Francisco Bay Area, and his online platform, the Doula, was created to help masculine identified people provide support to a birthing person before, during, and after childbirth. Jesse also hosts IGTV's Spill Milk, which centers on birth stories as well as the Hot Chocolate Chronicles, which features conversations about lactation. Very important piece. We're going to be discussing a number of things. And Chris Wray is a father to 4 children and the international first vice president of the Phi Beta Sigma fraternity. He's also a motivational speaker who specializes in the topic of building stronger fathers and certainly has a March Times connection. So thank you to all of you. I'm going to moderate our session today and ask each of our panelists a few questions specific to their area of expertise. But I really encourage them to get engaged more in discussion. And I will invite you again to make sure you post your questions in the chat, and we're going to do our best to answer them. So let's get started. I'm going to start with you, Ted, first. And let me ask you this. As a dad of twins myself, premature twins, can you please tell us about the birth of your triplets? And obviously, we're all sorry for your loss. Tell us what inspired you to write a book about your story and how your family continues to persevere.
Sure. Well, thank you. And thank you to the March of Dimes for having me here today. I'm glad to support you all in this important work, especially around Father's Day. So my triplets were born 12 years ago. They were natural, which is strangely enough. And my wife and I were hoping actually for twins, which runs in her family. And then when we found out what it was 3, it was okay. Yeah. Oh, crap. And it was pretty much the roller coaster from there. We really had, expectations that it was going to be tough, but we had no idea. And so she was on bed rest, trying to stave off labor, and then really they brought her to the hospital on extreme measures to really try to stop it. And unfortunately, 24 weeks and 5 days from conception, my children were born. They were born at Yale, which is great, a class 4 NICU, and had all the support in the world. But unfortunately, I lost my son, Raymond, after a week. That was September 11th, 2008. And from there on, the story keeps going on. I'm sure I'll have more time to tell the story, but it was such an adventure and took years and years and years before my daughter was able to breathe out of her mouth and her nose, 4+ years and 3 major surgeries. And now my kids are still both special needs. And so the whole journey as a dad was so, hard and such a learning experience for me. And I remember when I was going through it, wondering where were the resources for dads? Now, dads, as we all know, and I think can admit, are really bad at admitting we need help. I sure as hell didn't admit I needed help from anybody. But I did have some friends, including a neonatologist that was invaluable, and I had some resources from people that I knew. And I was thinking about how can I provide those resources to other dads who are going through these kinds of situations, and more importantly, give them license to know that they're not alone, and that there are other people, families that have gone through this, and provide some insight, and also provide insight to moms about what their husbands and partners may be going through as well. Because again, we don't like to talk. So that's why I wrote Table for 5. That's why I shared the story with everyone. That's why I'm here today, because I want dads to know that you're not alone. And all of us dads here talking about this, I think, is an important step in that awareness.
Thank you, Ted, and we are, again, sorry for your loss. We certainly totally understand. It's one of those things we don't talk about, and we need to talk about, and that's why we're here today. So clearly, I want to turn to Brother Terrence. You're also a father of a daughter born prematurely. Tell us about how your story and about how you and your wife supported each other through that experience, because I think we could all use some advice, some self-care for new dads. So, Brother Terrence.
So thank you guys for having me again. This is truly an honor just to be a part of such a distinguished panel of experts. I will tell you that you first of all, as a couple, you have to take care of each other. You have to be there. And I think initially I kind of missed the boat on that. You know, you kind of you know, as a man, you tend to want to, you know, make sure everything's okay, but you have to take the time to make sure that your wife is okay. Women tend to internalize things a little bit more and are more outward with it. We tend to internalize things, and we have this pride that we don't want to let anyone know that we are feeling a certain kind of way. So I wasn't talking enough. I wasn't expressive. I was just trying to be the tough guy. And I think I played that role for a little bit until I had one of my fraternity brothers to reach out to me, probably about a month in, and he showed me pictures of his daughter. And this is a guy I never met before, quite honestly. He showed me pictures of his daughter, and who was 8 at the time. And he said, "This is what you have to look forward to." And his daughter was born, I think it was 1 pound, 6 ounces. And it inspired me to say, you know what, we can actually do this. This can be done. Because before you go through something like this, you don't know anybody. You know, you just don't know. You think you're in this by yourself. And to find someone who had experienced this, and then when I started talking about it more, I started discovering others who had also gone through this. And then we started to develop this friendship throughout, you know, my fraternity and through my inner circle of individuals who to support. And so then I found myself as a family member supporting my own brother and sister-in-law through the unfortunate fortunate passing of a nephew through childbirth. And so, you know, going from being the person who's experiencing it to now being the person who has to walk someone else through an experience, it's been a challenge, but it's been an experience that, you know, I gladly accept the challenge to do and to support March of Dimes through its efforts of supporting moms and supporting dads through childbirth.
Thank you for that. And clearly, you know, we're also learning as we move forward, and the importance role that dads play is critical to our society, families, to just healthy growing up. So let me turn to you, Rob. We are thrilled to have you back today on our panel. Your daughter was born 3 months early at just 26 weeks. So, you know, having twins just a few days at the neonatal ICU, I know you must have spent quite a bit of time as a new dad in, unfortunately, what we call NICU or neonatal ICU, and then bringing a medically fragile child home. So tell us about, share some experience with us, as well as what do you think now that, looking back, you may have known then would have been helpful?
Oh man. Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for having me, and it's so nice to be in the company of all these great dads and to hear these stories. I don't really. It's so funny because like I have the luxury now of not having to talk about this. So now hearing all of this and hearing you guys share is just like it's really powerful. But yeah, our daughter was born at 26 weeks. I should preface all of this with she's totally fine. Like she's totally fine now. She's a 4-year-old maniac who's driving me crazy and, you know, pulling our dog's tail all the time. So she's in trouble as we speak. But yeah, it was, you know, it's just it's such a shock when your life takes a turn like that so suddenly and you don't really know what to do, and also no one else knows what you're going through. No one that I knew had really been through this, and we didn't really know what to expect. So you know, thankfully, I think as Terrence mentioned, like the more I kind of talked about it to my friends, they would connect me with other people who had gone through it, and maybe not to the degree that we had. I mean, but so many people have premature babies, and So I started connecting with some of those people. And another sort of kind of dumb thing, but I found very helpful was going on Instagram and searching hashtags like our daughter was born at 26 weeks. So I just wanted someone to tell me that everything was going to be okay. No one can really do that. Certainly your doctor can't, they legally, I don't think can do that at the hospital. So I would search like the hashtag 26 weeker, and I would just look for other parents that had kids and see how their kids were doing now. So that was like strangely so comforting to just see that, oh, things might work out okay. And we were very lucky. Our daughter has, she's had some delays with like speech, and um, we kind of stress about her lungs, that like maybe she's never had any lung problems, but when she was born, like the lungs are like sort of the last thing to develop. So we've always been stressed about her lungs. Luckily, she hasn't shown any problems, but during COVID, we were so stressed about that. But so to answer your question, what do I wish I knew now that I didn't know then? I don't know. I mean, I wish I could have time traveled now and just seen how much fun I'm having with this little crazy person all the time. She's such a blast, and I'm just having fun with her every day. And at the time, you just can't see that. There's no way to imagine that you might one day be there. So I wish I could have time traveled and seen that. And I wish that I could have that I had known about something like this, just to hear other people's stories, because it's so encouraging to hear that things might work out. And obviously, I have nothing but sympathy and love for people who things may not have worked out like ours did.
Thanks for sharing that, Rob. And in our business, you may not be able to time travel, but in your business, you can. But maybe you'll play a role of a NICU dad in the future, and you got our vote for it. So,
oh, the other one thing I would say very quickly, that just a stupid little tip that smart people will already have figured this out, but our daughter was born in LA at Cedars Hospital, and again, just like the best doctors. And if you are not a believer in science, like if you're one of those people that is, I don't know about science or medicine, like believe in science, like please believe in science, trust your doctors, like just, um, I just feel like right now, without getting too political, there there are a lot of people that do not believe in science. I'm telling you to believe in science. Like it will help you, I think, in the long run. And then the last thing I'll say, and then I'll shut up, is that one thing that helped us in the NICU is my wife and I traded off on when we would go to the NICU. So she would go in the morning for as long as she could go, and then I would come in at night and try to stay there until the hospital kicked me out. So just so that the baby always had one of us there, I thought that was important, and it took us a little bit to figure that out.
yeah, that's a great point. How do you make it last longer and pace yourself, because it is a long stay oftentimes, and how do you do that? That's a great point. And speaking of science, Dr. Shaw, it's great to see you. We certainly appreciate your time today. We've just heard from 3 dads who had children born prematurely. We know that in 2019, preterm birth pretty much affected 1 out of every 10 infants born in the United States. Your work now focuses, of course, on improving the birth outcomes and reducing maternal and infant mortality and morbidity, basically helping the moms and the babies, simply put, including preterm birth. So at a high level, what are some of the things that we could do in our country to improve the outcomes of birth? And especially, what do you think is the role of dads in that process?
Well, thank you. And let me just start by saying, Ted, Brother Terrence, Rob, thank you so much for sharing your very powerful and personal stories, and for being just such positive models of fatherhood, really. But I mean, to answer the question, Dr. Gupta, just at the high level, I mean, there's a lot that we can be doing structurally and systemically. You can't fix what you can't see, and you can't see what you're not measuring. we weren't having a conversation about a maternal mortality crisis in our country until just a few years ago. And the reason is that we weren't even measuring it. And there's so much that we need to do just on the public policy level. For example, right now, every state in America has an opportunity to extend Medicaid coverage to people who were exactly in Ted and Rob and Brother Terrence's situation in the postpartum period, which is so critical. And one of the cruelest features of our healthcare system right now is that just 2 months into having a baby, you can have the rug pulled out from underneath you in the midst of all of that and have no health insurance. So every state has that opportunity right now. And we also have opportunities as care providers to do better and be better and provide models of care that are reliable, that show up for people, that affirm their dignity along the way. But even though there is plenty to do structurally and systemically, there obviously is a very critical role that we can play personally, and particularly among fathers. From a scientific perspective, one of the strongest pieces of evidence that we have across pregnancy and birth for what improves outcomes is continuous support. And who's better positioned to do that than a person who really knows their partner very well. I can't really suggest anything other than I think what we heard from our three fathers, and all I can really do is uplift what they said, which is that of course, like you said, Brother Terrence, you got to take care of your partner, but to do that, you got to take care of yourself too. And I really appreciated what all of you said about that as well.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for those great comments and importance of policy, as well as mixing it up with just basic, simple humanity of taking care of each other. I want to turn to Jesse. Thanks for joining our panel. We know that you're passionate also about improving birth outcomes, especially amongst people of color. And I feel like the DoDat platform is the ultimate word, so just love that. Tell us more about your work on the DoDat platform, and then how are you raising awareness of disparities and the difference that doula support can make in our country? It's so critical, but yet such an infancy stage it's at. So help enlighten us.
Thank you, Dr. Gupta. Thank you to the March of Dimes for having me. And thank you to all of the guests for allowing me to share this space with you as the one non-father here. I believe that it's just a sacred space, and I'm just honored to be here sharing this space with you, and also to be able to showcase and highlight the work that I do. Dr. Shaw as well, my doula cohorts were very excited to see your name. They're super excited to see you. So thank you for the work that you're doing in the birthing community. I became a doula and created the doodad to combat the mortality rates in my community. Black birthing people and babies are dying 3 to 4 times more than any other race, and that to me in itself was enough motivation to get into this. But I also at the same time wanted to create a space that honored and celebrated those who were involved. At the same time, that was not happening, is not happening still to this day. And even as I kind of navigate through birth work, I still face a lot of misandry just for being a male in birth work. But I'm just, powering through all that. The name Doodad is actually a double entendre of the word doula, D-O-U-L-A, a birth companion, and the word doodad, D-O-O-D-A-D, which is an ornamental attachment, decoration, or often small article whose name is often forgotten, which is the sentiment that most of the fathers, support people were feeling and do feel currently when they're in the birthing space, just pushed aside, no voice. It's amazing that the way that you're treated in the birthing space solely for the fact that you're a male. It's unfortunate, but yeah, that's kind of how I got involved in everything. Watching my mother work alongside underserved communities for years, working alongside her, it just kind of rolled into it for me. So
wonderful, wonderful. And remember for folks to type in your questions, because we're really excited to be having the opportunity to answer some of those in just a few minutes. I want to turn to Chris Wray. Thanks so much for joining us as well. I know you regularly pretty much speak on the topic of building stronger fathers. So tell us at a high level what it means how do we build strong fathers, which is, as we all understand, is critical.
Right. So that's the mystery question, right? How can you really do that? Well, let me first start off by saying, of course, thank you to the March of Dimes for creating this platform for fathers. All right. So most of the time when you think about March of Dimes, you think about moms, you think about babies. And somewhere there you get dads in there. So I'm very excited to see this growth in this space around this subject matter. Let me also say happy birthday to my daughter, Ava. Today's her birthday. She's 8 years old today. So shout out. Of course, if she was to see this video, I need to make sure that I put that out there, because if not, then I would hear about it again later on. But when we talk about building stronger fathers, I will always say that, the first thing that we have to recognize is that just like new moms who are trying to figure it out, I think that it's important that we understand that dads are trying to figure it out as well. And as we talk through society, that really does create this space that makes it seem like we have it all together, that we should just know what to do, and you should just figure it out. But when you're talking about a human being and you're talking about what comes along with that, no, we don't know that. And I think it's okay to be able to first acknowledge and say that. Letting folks know that there are resources that are out there for us as men to be able to be the best fathers that we can be. And I think the March of Dimes is one of those resources, right? We are having this discussion today. I don't know if you understand how important that this is, that there are fathers out there right now looking at this because they didn't have anyone to really turn to because their space did not allow for them to understand that. Brother Torrance and I, who are both members of fraternities, you get the opportunity to be around a lot of brothers, right? And in that brotherhood, it allows for there to be a level of nurturing. But even in that space, we don't even do the best of work and the best job in nurturing one another. Sometimes it's being an ear or even knowing how to go to our brother. But think about the men who are not part of fraternities, men who are not part of social groups that allow for that current interaction. And I think that when you talk about building stronger fathers, is identifying additional spaces for individuals to be able to have these discussions. And I think it's very important that it's said that just like women are seen as nurturers, fathers are nurturers as well. And that has to be said because when you see the impact of what happens to children when the father is not a part of their life, that's a part of that nurturing of that child growing. It's not just a part of me just being there as a dad. A part of me being a part of their life and me being a part of that conversation is a part of that nurturing of that child. And so I think that it's important that as society, as we begin to move, continuing to have this subject matter spoken about, that we acknowledge that we are just as much as nurturers as our female counterparts, and that it's important that we have spaces for us to be able to express the challenges that we have, but also the opportunities that lie within fatherhood as well. That it's not just, I got to spend all this money because now I'm a dad, but no, that there is a whole other space that comes along being a father that really changes humanity.
That's a very good point, Chris, and thank you for sharing that, because it's not just about the responsibilities, or it's also about the enjoyment of life with your family, with your loved one, and with your child, and nurture that, and that's nurturing. So thank you for sharing that. I like to emphasize how important it is for fathers, and as you mentioned, father figures, to be present and supportive for their partners. As myself, dad of twin boys, I can't tell you how rewarding it's been to be there for them. So I want to turn to Ted. When you released your first book, Table for Five, A Father's Story of Life, Love, and Loss last year, you mentioned that you noticed there weren't a lot of resources for fathers. Clearly, I think many of us, or most of us, have seen that across our lives, and we look back. And then there's usually a lot of others, books for moms and others that are available around the topic of the loss of a child. What advice would you give to a father or a father figure that is coping with loss, in need of resources, but maybe isn't sure where to start or should even look for resources?
Yeah. Well, look, I think Brother Terrence said it pretty well. I think other dads said it pretty well. in terms of where to look, I'll echo that it was surprising to me who you know, or who the people you know. I think, Rob, you said that too. It's one of the things I bring up in my book. It starts with a scene of me doing lunches. I have a lot of lunches with people I don't know very well. It's just the nature of what I do, I guess, as an entrepreneur. And you talk about, losing a child, or you talk about having a preemie or something like that. And a lot of people do, right? Unfortunately, as you said, Dr. Gupta, this is a growth industry. More and more children are being born prematurely. And so you don't know who you don't know. And so I think the first thing really is, it's kind of, it's not like a 12-step program, but it's kind of like accept that you aren't in control of things, which was very hard for me. I'm very, very type A. I'm very much, stereotypical male, inability to admit that I don't know anything, or I can't take control of anything and can't fix something. And kind of approach it with a little bit of vulnerability. And I was surprised that there are other people out there that have been through this. Now, of course, for me, that discovery really came after. I mean, it was, 8 months in the NICU, what have you. So, and then years at home, running what I call an ICU in my house, because my daughter needed 24-hour care. And so I didn't reach out soon enough. So I think it's really, the first thing is really just to say, look, you know what, like maybe you do need help. Like even consider the fact that you might need help, and even consider that you might need help with your partner, which I think is ultra important too. The one thing that always struck me as an irony is that I always get asked, how is my wife doing? Right? I'm sure you other dads can feel this too, right? Like, you feel me on this one? Like, hey, how's your wife doing? And like the implication is, Ted, you're doing great, right? Like you're fine. And more importantly, not only are you fine, like you got to make sure your wife is she's not fine, right? You got to make sure she's cool, right? And that there's just so much implicit bias in that, as Jesse was saying. And the only way through that is kind of, not fall into that, reach out, look for those resources. 12 years ago, it wasn't Instagram, so I couldn't do what Rob was doing. Even Facebook didn't have very much. Now there is so much more, so many more resources, including by the March of Dimes and so many other organizations that are out there that will actually do this connection work. My wife does some nonprofit work in that space herself, and you just, unfortunately, you got to take that first step, right? And you gotta do that little bit of outreach, and I think that is what'll get you there.
Absolutely. And one of those resources, if you go to marchdimes.org, there's a Becoming a Dad tab you can look into and get those resources, as well as many other places as well. So you're exactly right. Rob, the 3 months you may have spent or back and forth from NICU every day, I know, as you're explaining, you would split your time with your wife, but it's got to be concerning every time you go in, because you're going to the hospital. And then now you see your daughter grow up. So how does that feel, just to see all of that effort come to fruition every single day? So tell us about that. And you did mention that a little bit. But.
Yeah. Well, also I just wanted to piggyback on something Ted said. Like, I bet that you could now, I didn't know about Zoom before the pandemic. I don't know if anyone knew what this was. I wish I had invested in Zoom, because obviously we're all on here. But I bet it would be not that difficult to set up a group like this with other dads that are going through this. Like if you can do some outreach and connect with people. I think Jesse said, like, the more you reach out, the more you figure out like who knows who, and someone will connect you with somebody else. I bet you could easily set up a Zoom like this, which would feel really supportive and give you some encouragement, I think, at a really rough time for most dads. So I guess what I'm saying is shout out to Zoom. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, it's like I said, I'm so lucky to be where I am now. When I think about what it was like when we were going through that, one thing I also didn't anticipate, and this is true for all new parents, not just NICU parents, but you don't think about how physically tired you will be and how mentally exhausted you are from going through just having a new baby is so exhausting. And most people, I feel like a lot of parents don't tell you that. It's like a dirty little secret that you will be so exhausted mentally. And so I think it's useful to keep in mind that you are a different person, and your spouse or partner is also a different person at that time. You are just deprived of sleep. And I know I was a maniac and my wife was a maniac, and you sort of just have to say, like, let's get through this, let's survive this time period, and like let everything roll off of you as much as possible, because when you're in that sort of crisis situation, it really is just surviving. And so you have to just forgive all of like the little comments and little dumb things that you could argue about. Just let that go. You'll deal with that later. Let's just get through this hard time. Um, so, but yeah, so how does it feel now to have I couldn't be more grateful, and we became very good friends with our NICU doctors, um, who we have like socialized with and gone out and had drinks. I was very surprised that these NICU doctors would also drink alcohol, but we've had beers with our doctors, and they're just regular people, and so we've been very lucky to continue that relationship and hear about what they're doing with their careers. And a lot of our doctors have now had their own babies, and so that's been so amazing to see that also. Um, so yeah, it's all, I would say, if you can remember that hopefully this is a season, that this will, one day the clouds will part, and you, I hope, will get to that place of connecting with your child and having fun with your child, and just um, enjoying that connection, because there is no other connection like that. So it's so hard at the beginning, but just know that hopefully one day it's all the clouds will part.
Thank you. That's great advice. And just remind folks that please keep sending your questions in, because we are very soon going to be taking a shot at those questions. So the panel will do their best to answer those. So please send those questions in. Brother Terence, you and your wife's experience with preterm birth have led to you to start a community that gives back and helps families in similar situations. How important is it for father figures and fathers to especially become part of that community and provide support? And what could potentially be the things that folks may be resistant to a little bit to do that?
I was wondering who was going to be the first one to do that. That was me, I guess, not unmuting myself. So full disclosure, I had to actually change my name on the title, because Terrence is my first name. Brother is my fraternity title that we all use. So I kept hearing Brother Terrence. I'm like, who are they talking about? They're actually talking about me. So I changed that. All right. So it's just Terrence.
Consider this your fraternity.
and Rob, I want to call you AJ so bad. So hey, man, it's an honor to be on the call with you. I love The Office. But on a serious note, I think the best way to support dads is to support March of Dimes, because as a man, we're not going to come and ask for help. We have this pride about us, and then we struggle through the various mental anguish, depression, and we're not outward with it. So we tend to keep things in. So I will tell everyone who's listening and watching this call, continue to support March of Dimes, because March of Dimes has the resources to come to you. And that's exactly what happened to us. We were sitting there, baby's born, and I got a tap on my shoulder from Angela, who said, Terrence, how can I help you? And that meant just the world to us, to know that we were not in this by ourselves. So I just want to advocate again and say, we're stubborn as men. We are. And whether we want to admit that or not, I know my wife is looking and saying, oh, you're admitting you're stubborn? I am admitting it. We are stubborn. And we do not want to go out and seek the help. We're not as transparent as we should be. And I just think through supporting a March of Dimes and going to the dads and letting them know how they can help and support, it would be definitely a great thing to support for us.
It's a good point. That typically happens, the stubbornness piece. So turn to Chris. Phi Beta Sigma has a mentorship program for young men intended to promote sense of empowerment. and commitment to the community. What do you think about these mentoring programs? How do they prepare young men for fatherhood? Tell us a little bit more about that.
Sure. So let me first say that we're very proud of our Sigma Beta Club mentoring initiative. We've been doing it now for 70 years. So when I think about the level of impact that our organization has had on I would dare say hundreds of thousands of men, right, across the generations. And today our mentoring program is the largest it's ever been in our fraternity's history. But when I think about that level of impact, and you think about so many of these young men, many of them come from families that are low income or single parent, mom and dad, but mostly moms. And so having the opportunity to have that male role model as a part of their development, again, is very, very important. Because in those mentoring initiatives, we're teaching them about conflict resolution, right? We're teaching them about how to be able to work together as a unit to be able to get to whatever the end state is. We're teaching them values of what's going to allow for them to be successful, or unlocking in them talents that they may not be able to see, because it may take an older gentleman that's able to see something in them that they can't see themselves between the ages of 8 and 18. And so the mentoring initiatives, what it does is it puts them on a better track that they would not be particularly on if they was not exposed to those men who are, the majority of them are college educated, they're professional men, and being able to give them a perspective that they may not be getting in their home. And so it's a tremendous win for those young men, but then there's that fulfilling part for us as well, right? Because again, to what Terrence is saying, because we sometimes can be stubborn, because sometimes we're not as forthcoming as we should be as men in certain spaces, there is something about understanding the role and responsibility you have when you are empowering the next generation. It's just like there's something that just comes over you, and you recognize that, that our existence, especially as a people, requires us to be able to figure out how we're going to give back. And this space allows for us to do that. And so I think that, those young men are getting, and then they're taking that, and then hopefully they'll be doing the same thing later on in their life as well. And so it just continues to perpetuate.
That's such an important piece to mention, that being able to get back to the community, help the next generation, and hopefully that in the process reduces our stubbornness a little bit. When I asked Neil, Dr. Shaw, you're committed to addressing racial disparities and the rise of mortality rates experienced by American families. How can we align our advocacy efforts for families, healthcare providers, industry, policymakers, and so many other partners to ensure that all families in our society can have a fair and healthy start?
Rookie move.
You may be on mute.
Man, well, I wasn't the first person, so. But I did get your name wrong, Terrence. So that's on me. I was just winding up because it's such a big question, but the well-being of people who are giving birth in our country is really a bellwether for the well-being of all of us, right? If moms and young families are unwell, society is unwell. And that's why we see every issue of social justice show up in the outcomes of moms and babies, whether it's misogyny or racism. I think that the solution really starts with being able to name racism as a root cause of the disparities that we see, to be able to understand that a bad system will beat a good person every time. So we need to be able to think about racism, not just in interpersonal terms, but really look at the systemic causes when, it's not just that racism shows up in maternal health, right? It's like one of the leading indicators that systemic racism is a thing, because education, income, nothing is protective. There's something built into the medical system, including the literal quantifiable algorithms that we use, where we gate services based on people's skin color. We've got a long way to go, and we're seeing a lot of reformation in the professions, in the healthcare professions, and the healthcare system as a result right now, which is really positive. But I think the framing of the question is really the solution. It is too aligned with people who have the lived and embodied experience with racism. And one of the things I'm seeing actually is a proliferation of community-based organizations across our country. It really has progressed from being an issue to a movement, to a revolution, where almost every city in America has community-based doulas that are organizing. And we saw something very similar with HIV/AIDS in the early 80s, where there was a really marginalized, stigmatized group that was being disproportionately affected. And the Reagan administration and others were not paying attention. They were getting leftover chemotherapies that didn't work. And they organized. They made it such that you can't do HIV/AIDS research today without a community advisory board. They got AZT out there. They dropped mortality by 70%. And we're seeing the same thing. So I think policymakers are just getting caught up, but we now have a whole package of federal legislation that's community informed, and I think has potential to make a big difference.
Great, wonderful. You know, we're going to get to the questions now. So let me take the first question that's come up from Facebook chat. So, and this is up for grabs, anyone or more than one person, which is, what would be your ideal Father's Day?
On the beach, no kids. I love my kids though. I love them. I love them. But no kids. That's all.
I love that now we finally get down to the truth of this discussion, which is I don't want to be around my kids on
I don't
Father's
want to
Day.
be around my kids on Father's Day. I'm a father every day. On Father's Day, a beach, and that's all I'm gonna say. I'm gonna just on the beach.
You on one break one day a year, right? So,
right, in the Caribbean.
I would say just allow me to spend that day the way I want to spend that day. That's my main thing. Let me decide that, because I know my wife tends to map it all out, and I'm like, I don't want to go anywhere. I just want to be lazy one day. So I think that's my main thing.
Right.
I'm with you, man.
That was a PC way of saying no kids, but that's okay. Go on, Terrence. That's okay. Go ahead.
You know, it's almost like the folks who are asking questions knew the answers, because the next question I have for folks here is, how can we as men be more supportive of our spouses who've gone through the birthing of our children? So, you know, really seriously, how do we provide more support to our spouses in a very difficult time while caring for the baby, as well as considering, you know, care for ourselves as well?
Yeah, I mean, for me and for us, one of the most difficult things was that we had our children born, but they were in the NICU and they weren't in our house, right? And of course, I didn't know what the hell I was about to get into because things got a lot crazier. But certainly, that was really, really hard, I think, for my wife. And it's, you know, she still talks about it now because it's so much of the birthing experience is, you know, the way, you know, we think about it in TV and movies. It's you know, perfect, and the child comes home and, you know, everyone's there and they celebrate or whatever, and it's all good. And when you've got, you know, situations like the situations that we've been through, you go home and there's nothing. Right. And, you know, you call, you know, we'd have a ritual we call every day, and then you'd go to bed and you'd hear nothing. And there's no screaming to keep you up even. But you're every bit as exhausted because the emotional and mental toll is ridiculous. That was really hard. And I think it's, you know, look, I can't, you know, I'm horrible at trying to figure out what my wife needs, right? So, you know, I think it's really just saying that, look, I can be here and try to understand some of this, right? And do what I can do. And, you know, again, take care of yourself so that you can take care of others, certainly, but then be open to that vulnerability. But, you know, that sticks out in my mind. And of course, in losing our child, same thing. You know, I think it's very important that even though we were here talking about fathers, that we understand that it's a team, you know, if you're lucky. And, you know, a lot of it must be about making sure that we stand together.
So one of the things I'll also add really quickly, Dr. Gupta, one of the things that we're working on in Phi Beta Sigma, we're doing a virtual webinars around becoming a dad curriculum, right? So, and a part of that curriculum is support. And so what we're going to be encouraging our members to do is recruiting, fathers or soon to be fathers in their communities to be a part of these webinars. Because I think, again, a part of our responsibility as an organization is to really identify the tools that are necessary for individuals to, again, like Ted was saying, us making sure we take care of ourselves, but then also reminding us like, okay, you're not also going through this, your partner's also going through this as well. And what are some of the things that we can provide in order to make that happen? And that's a great collaboration we're doing, again, with the March of Dimes, that's allowing us to develop that information to put out into the community.
One thing that that I would throw in, which is obvious to a lot of people, but because we only had one baby at home, we were able to sort of take shifts. Like, so my wife would hustle and do everything for about 4 hours and then try to sleep, and then I would take over, and then we would flip flop. So we were just like just trying to get sleep. Is obviously I love sleep, but we would just try to do everything in shifts like that around the clock, and that sort of worked out for us. Just trying to break things down into manageable chunks of the day.
I know there's a question specifically for Jesse, and I want to actually just set him up a little bit, because I wanted to say that after delivering literally thousands of babies myself, having to support my own wife when she was having our first child was one of the most humbling experiences of my entire life. And it just gave me a really deep appreciation for doulas, which I thought I already had, but the notion of support as something that you do professionally, I have real professional expertise in. So just want to add that.
And I want to ask Jesse actually a question, and you can respond to this as well, Jesse, which is, in the same sort of theme. What are the qualities that pregnant people should look for in a doula before bringing them along for their birthing experience and process? So.
I want to answer that, but I just want to right off the last question too, is something I always remind my clients, because I, work with couples, I work with single parents, I work with a lot of people, but, the birthing process is just as much as yours as it is your partner's. And, you created this baby together. And so I always try to loop the partner. I'm always looping the partner back in, that this is just as much as your process as anybody else's. So, make sure you're taking care of you too. If you're not good, how can you take care of somebody else? Definitely something I drill in. But in terms of looking for a doula, you have to figure out what are your expectations for your birth? Do you have an expectations for your birth? And I think once you can define what you want, that's my theme for my platform, is your birth, your way. What do you want this birth to look like? Who do you want there? And once you can define all of those things, I think that will help you find the perfect match for your doula. And doulas do not just support during birth. We offer support before birth and well after birth as well. And that support does not just go for the birthing person. That support afterwards, postpartum care, is for the whole family. We're washing dishes, we're vacuuming, we're taking care of mom, dad, children, whatever is necessary in the household, so something to also keep in mind.
Wow. That is really important to know and realize, and goes back to, that's the time when people don't really know that that's available. So it's very important to plan ahead. So thank you for those thoughts as well. I want to ask really almost a last question, but it's really on everybody's participation. It's kind of important. So what's the best part of being a dad? And or you can also say, what's the best advice one may have given you of a part of being a dad?
Look at us. Everybody's terrified to take a swing at that one. I think that it is funny that it's hard. Sometimes it's hard to talk about fatherhood, because you do feel like, and I sort of feel this way about Father's Day. Like I just had a birthday, and my wife got me a hotel room so I could go and just watch TV by myself, and that was so nice. And then now, a week later, it's Father's Day, so I told my wife, please don't do anything. But I think some good advice is that like it's such a process, and it's fine to say I don't know what I'm doing. You know, like when I think back to when I was little and the way my parents parented, you don't know when you're a kid that your parents are making it up as they go along. They're just completely winging it, but you don't have that perception of things. You think that they know what they're doing. So I think it's fine to say, maybe not to your kid, but to yourself and to your partner that like I don't know what I'm doing. I'm making this up as I go along, and and just be open to change, to changing and to learning as you do it. Like I think it's really hard to have a total game plan for every situation all the time. That's too stressful and impossible. So I think just be open to always learning and always changing.
Make it up as you go, but stay engaged.
I was going to say, enjoy the ride,
Yeah.
and enjoy the experience of being a dad, because it's a roller coaster, because everything changes. You know, when your kids change, your relationship changes, and so you know, I'm at that point now. Again, my baby is 10. And if she wanted a car tomorrow, she could get it. I mean, I'm not gonna lie to you. I would go get that car for her. Now, my 17-year-old, he has to convince me that he wants it. That's just being honest with you. But in all seriousness, you know, she doesn't hug me like she used to hug me. You know, because she's at that age now, Daddy. You know, she's looking at me funny when I walk in the room because she's growing up, and that hurts. You know, at first that hurt because that's my baby. But, you know, as a dad, you have to understand she's changing, so you have to change. Everything is not, that relationship is not the same as it was when you brought her home. And you have to accept that.
So I would echo and jump in and say everything that Terrence said on top of, I think the best part of being a dad is understanding legacy, right? If you're someone who's in touch with your family, understanding, you know, my family were sharecroppers. You know, they were farmers. To now, I was a former mayor of a city. To whatever the next expectation is for my children. And I think that understanding that you have a role in playing in what the future of what your family's dynamics can be, I think that's one of the greatest privileges of being a father. You know, and I think the one little caveat, selfish caveat, is I love knowing that there is a group, you know, little people that they just depend on me, and there's just something about that. I just think that that's great. And so shout out to all the dads. Still come to the Caribbean with me if you want, though.
Wow.
No kids.
Yes.
Yeah,
No
you know,
kids.
it's been just an amazing discussion. The hour is almost up. Wish we had more time today. I want to first of all thank you to all of our panelists again for providing us and our viewers with this great information. And thank you to Signa. If there's any last comments, quickly, I would just welcome those from any one of our panelists.
Dr. Gupta, I just want to lift up this idea of fatherhood being a learning journey, and just the values of humility and curiosity through all of it. I think probably everybody on this can attest to the way that the whole experience knocks you off your feet from the moment your child is born, actually before then. One of my favorite things with being an obstetrician actually is the moment where a dad realizes he's a dad, because, you know, the person with the uterus really experiences the kicking, but like the minute the baby is born, it gets so real for so many people in the room. That's my favorite moment every time I'm on call, is just seeing that moment of recognition. And then it just keeps going. But as long as you stay humble and curious and are open to learning and growth, as everybody said, you'll be all right.
Wonderful. And those are wonderful and amazing and real comments to close with. I want to thank you again. The resources, we do have a number of resources available on a slide. Please visit any and all of these resources. Just remember that fatherhood is so important. And this conversation today reminds us that parents and babies need us now more than ever. If you would like to support the work we're doing, you can start at March of Dimes Do It Yourself Father's Day fundraisers by clicking on the link that's provided here. And please join us again on July 15th for this Healthy Mom, Strong Baby series, when we will be discussing Black birth and disparities. Happy Father's Day, everyone, and thank you to our panelists again.